This is Hot Science with the week's top news in science, technology, environment, and medicine. It's hosted by Richard Clarke. That's me, and welcome. All right, let me give you the rundown on what we have for the week. The top news story for the week, I thought, was on the rising seas. The head of the UN says rising seas threaten mass exodus on a biblical scale. And in technology, as usual nowadays, the top story is an AI story. And this one I thought was interesting. It's 8 signs that the AI revolution is spinning out of control. And in the environment, the U.S. plans to become the world's clean tech superpower. And in materials, there is evidence for a chiral semiconductor which could bring quantum computing closer to the mainstream. And in space, a new startup company, Astroforge, their space mining technology will get its first real-world test this year. And in biology, cockatoos pick the right tool for the job and carry their toolkits with them. And in human, we have human origins, the face, which turns out to be a big deal. It's one of our main communication tools. And in medical, and pay attention to this, guys, a study finds that there's a kind of mushroom that magnifies memory by launching nerve growth. So there's a mushroom that's been used in Chinese medicine for a long time that they have established actually promotes brain growth and memory. So some people around our age group think that that would be a good thing.
Yeah. How about Prevagen?
Okay. Well, you're going to have to wait to listen. Okay. Now on with the news. Rising seas threaten mass exodus on a biblical scale, the UN guy says. An increase at the pace of the sea level are rising threatens, quote, a mass exodus of entire populations on a biblical scale, says the UN Secretary General. The climate crisis is causing sea levels to rise faster than they have for the last 3,000 years, and it brings with it a torrent of trouble to almost 1 billion people from London to LA to Bangkok and to Buenos Aires as examples. Some locations could cease to exist. So one issue is developing new international laws to protect those made homeless and even stateless. This is going to be needed, and low-lying communities and entire countries could disappear forever. We would witness a mass exodus of entire populations, and we would see ever fiercer competition for fresh water, land, and other resources. I have just a couple of pictures. This is not one. this is already, this is floods in
Indonesia.
Indonesia this week. Typical of the urban flood situations with cars and vehicles and people and motorcycles making it through the road with another few inches of water. None of these internal combustion engines would be able to go through the water. And here's another example in Pakistan with the floods in Pakistan. How would you like that to be your farm country? I guess you wouldn't need to water for a while, but anyway, this is one of the things that is happening to the planet now. We know that by the end of this century, the water will be high and will displace millions of people. What we don't know is how much higher it's going to get, and how many people it's going to displace. It's going to be a lot. I think here, a mile high in Mexico, we don't have much worry about it, though. Anyway,
Not for a while.
comments from you guys.
Well, I found the article interesting in that, I was born and raised, of course, as you all know, in the Netherlands and in The Hague, to be sure. And I don't think there's one place in The Hague that is more than 1 meter above sea level. And
Oh, God.
so, yeah. And so
Uh-huh.
The Hague has, it's not a huge city as cities go, but still about maybe 700,000 people. And, all of it is in perfect repair. I mean, there's one thing about the country when I was there last September, that was one of the things that I noticed is there was just, no houses falling apart or anything like that, but everything is just looks absolutely beautiful. But if it's going to be underwater, we cannot be going.
Yeah, what are they going to do? Are they
I
going to
don't
keep
know.
building the dikes higher or what?
Well, that's been the remedy, and the question for the Hague is protected,
Uh-huh.
and much of South Holland by a row of dunes. But still, if the seas rise, where the beaches disappear and the sea is hitting the dunes, I mean the dunes are just piles of sand, and they're not going to last very long either.
Uh-huh.
So
Around here, I wonder even what will happen to the beachside communities like Puerto Vallarta. Isn't a lot of Puerto Vallarta within a few feet of the ocean?
I don't know. Maybe Miss Clark or Miss
How's your place, Norman? Is your place up on a hill?
Our unit is up on the 6th floor. The building is right on the sand.
Okay. So you'll be safe. You just won't be able to get in and out of the building except by a boat.
Should I live that long?
Okay. Well, let us hope you are able to meet the challenge.
There's an element of that article, like the fellow on the corner with the sign saying the world is going to end by Friday. They're preaching climate catastrophe when really it's not going to be nearly as bad or as fast as the media would like us to think.
Well, it depends on what you mean by fast. If it happens over decades, it's slow. It's still going to be, having them argue about whether it's going to be 300 million people displaced this century or a billion people displaced doesn't make it sound like a small problem. There already are places in the U.S. and Florida where they see the problems now.
Well, if a storm comes along and if the water is high, and they have been able to protect themselves with a dike of some sort, but if a good storm comes by, then all of a sudden all these dreams will become, just that, a dream.
Well, I hope all those Dutchmen moved to Canada because that's the best thing that happened to Canada after the war was all that immigration from Holland. So
Yeah.
Okay.
there's no cloud without a silver lining.
Yeah, well, but this is affecting literally billions of people. This is going to be a pretty big nut to crack.
Well, they say so, but the problem is the bureaucracies are unable to handle the paperwork that would deal with all that immigration. So then what'll happen?
Yeah.
But the
And it's hard,
magnitude,
especially for those people whose country disappears. It's hard to get a passport when your country vanished under the water.
Yeah, but Richard, do you really think that's going to happen?
Yes, it's happening now. It's just small Pacific Island nation, so we don't care.
Yeah, but that's
It's
true.
not in our backyard. Again,
but
it's
the
happening now.
overall magnitude of the migrations are just, it's incredible. Like you
Yes.
said, prospectively, billions of people emigrating.
Even if it's just at 1 billion, that's a lot immigrating. And I really appreciate that it says, political instability is going to happen because of this, because no country is prepared to deal with it. Like Andrew was saying, one part of dealing with it is just the administrative side, dealing with the people and getting them residency permits and stuff like that. And bureaucracy doesn't change that fast.
So then, given that it's an insoluble problem and the catastrophe is real, do you think we should all just give up?
No.
Well, then, what do you think?
Well, I
gonna
think
happen?
my opinion is we have to do what we can to mitigate the damage. And to mitigate the damage, there are a couple of parts of it. One part of it is stop damaging it. And another part is figure out how to deal with the consequences. That's why, for example, in the environmental section a while back, I added another section within it of adaptation. And, if you look at adaptation, there actually are a lot of things that are happening around the world already. The scale of the disaster is bigger than the scale of what they're doing, but there are already people who are trying to say, we have this coming upon us. How do we live in a way to live with it and deal with it? Like moving in Indonesia, moving Jakarta to higher ground is a big example of it. Let's hope we don't all have to deal with it by $100 billion projects. But
Well, Jakarta is home to what, 12 million people? Something like that.
I don't know how many.
It
Yeah,
would
it's,
be in that range. But I
Yeah,
spent 5 years there in the 1990s, and we had a flood like that twice a year. The water was up to over the hubcaps on the cars, and everybody just lived through it, and they're all still there, and there's twice as many now as there were 25 years ago.
Uh-huh. What do you think it'll be like in 25 years from now?
I think they'll all be there, and there'll be twice as many people again, and they'll just be living with it.
yeah, but saying the difference this time is that the water is not going to go down; it's going to stay, and then the place becomes unlivable.
Well, to remember, 10 years ago, they were talking about all this fresh water off the glaciers flowing into the North Atlantic and stopping the Atlantic conveyor that brings warm water in the Gulf Stream up to Scandinavia. But you don't hear anything about that anymore. Last time I heard anything about that was 10 or 15 years ago.
I don't know. I
So-
still continue to read things about, changes in the ocean currents that are brewing. It's just that's an area where we don't know a lot about. We're seeing effects of it now. One of the effects of it is worse and worse periods of El Nino and La Nina. So that's having a bigger effect on Asia and Mexico and California. So we see effects. The thing with the water is such a big heat reservoir and there's so much of it that it heats up slowly. But anyway, proceeding along, their AI is in the headlines everywhere, and the AI revolution maybe is really upon us. And big corporations now, spurred by the specter of easy profits, have started to roll out new tools and products that use AI to enhance the user experience. At least that's what they say. And this totally unregulated field also has the potential to hugely disrupt existing industries, our way of life, art, judicial systems, and many other things. And this article presents what it says are some of the warning signs that the robot revolution could get very, very messy. The first example they have is ChatGPT passing a coding exam. Google went through and gave ChatGPT its coding test the same way they give people who are applying for jobs the test. And ChatGPT passed it, they say, with flying colors, and is qualified to get hired at level 3 for a coding position. That's fairly high up in the scheme. Such a coding level comes now with an average salary of $183,000 per year. The salary seemed to have gone up since I was in high tech. But anyway, and there they can do that with ChatGPT. And in the legal affairs, for the first time, a judge has used ChatGPT in a legal case, a legal ruling that he made. And it was a judge in Colombia decided to use ChatGPT to render a judicial decision concerning an autistic child's medical insurance. The arguments for this decision will be determined in line with the use of AI. Gosh, the judge wrote in his decision, what we're really looking for is to optimize the time spent drafting judgments. So I have ChatGPT draft the judgments and then just edit it and sign it at the end. I hope they fact check it. The next is using AI to write screenplays. And there's a lot of activity here. There are a number of new programs and services that say their AI can be used to write screenplays and automate the filmmaking process. For example, there's one AI startup from DeepMind, a tool called Dramation, which it calls a co-writing tool. It helps with story generation, consistency across the text. It'll help with character generation and the plot and location descriptions and dialogue. I've seen already with ChatGPT, they're saying, they can write you a script for a video, and you can take that script and put it in another tool, and you can choose your automated voice, and it can make you a video without actors directly from the script generated by ChatGPT, so you have a video made without human hands. Then the next area is this using AI to replace voice actors. The entertainment industry is already trying to automate voice acting. And now one of the things that voiceover actors are seeing is they're being asked to sign away the rights to their own voices so that AI can be used to create synthetic versions of their voices. Already in one of my videos that I do, I used one of these services because I wanted to make an introduction to the video, and I wanted to have some voice other than mine. And who can afford to hire a voice actor or something like that? So I had the voice segment read my script, and it sounded good to me. And it was a different voice, and I can certainly see why people would do this. Then, of course, there's the interest in using AI to replace journalists. And there was a fluff a few weeks ago when the news came out that CNET had been publishing many financial articles using their own AI programs. A lot of that is formatted data, so it seems like a good application. The only problem is there were a number of articles that had errors in fact, and other articles where it had what they call a whiff of plagiarism. So they still have to work on those models, but that is also close. And then the stock market now, is the AI excites the stock market, and the stock market hype machine has now descended upon us, and anything with AI in its name seems to be of interest in the stock market. And then there's another area that I really hadn't considered well enough, and that is using AI to spy on people. And the example they use here of combining surveillance systems with artificial intelligence is from Russia, where AI is being integrated into their massive networks of security cameras to create cities where there is no place to hide, where the AI is able to track people. What they don't talk about here, though, is the area of communications intelligence. I was in the Air Force 60 years ago when things were primitive and they were still using Morse code to communicate and things like this. And So I've known that this communications intelligence is an active area. Then all my adult life, I haven't been as worried about it because in the world today, there is such a mass of communications that there's no way any analyst like I was could read enough of the stuff to matter. But now they don't need the human analyst to listen in on the conversation. They can let loose their army of AIs. And so this is going to certainly revolutionize communication intelligence. And I'm not sure if that's all for the better. And then, of course, for the companies that are in the business, there has now started an AI arms race where Silicon Valley is looking to capitalize on AI's big moment, and every big tech company is feverishly trying to churn out some new product or service to keep pace with ChatGPT's 100 million users in its first 2 months. Microsoft started it off integrating ChatGPT into Bing. That's already so successful that they have put limits into how many chats you can ask in a session or in a day. You can ask it 5 questions in a session now, or I can't remember, 100 questions a day, something like that. It's the limit, but it's still a big limit. Google has announced it's going to be launching its own AI search integration that it calls Bard. It already, their tool made a mistake in its launch and cost Google stock more than $100 million in its valuation because of the error of its leading product in its announcement. And in China, Alibaba, the Chinese Amazon, and Baidu, the Chinese Google, have announced that they're going to be pursuing their own AI tools. And so big tech is jumping into AI with both feet, and tools are going to proliferate, and we don't know how broadly they will be now. Every day, it seems like there are new tools being announced. And, one of the things I wonder about this revolution is what do our grandchildren do for their education? Because to me, it seems like these kind of tools are going to change the workplace immensely, and that they're going to change what we need to do to educate ourselves immensely. The thing is that while we know these changes are coming, nobody knows the shape of these changes or, what to do. So it's, one of the questions now is times are changing, and what do our grandkids do to prepare for that?
Well, I think our grandchildren will probably encounter a watered down situation. Our grandchildren. Anyway, when I read this story, when I was in Holland, my brother plays piano and he has a keyboard, one of these electronic keyboards, and he had just bought a new one. And like a half a year ago. Why, but now it's a little longer, doesn't matter. But anyhow, he demonstrated like he would play a little tune, and then he would just let his hands go, and the piano would continue to play and finish the whole thing in an orderly fashion. I mean, like you would swear he's still playing, and I mean it's not like one or two sounds after that, but
Right,
it
right.
would go on for like maybe 5 minutes or so. The only thing that I think is that I wonder if there's a creative side to it. I mean, we in music, for instance, we have composers, and I mean, these people come up with interesting combinations of sound.
Well, one of the
There's
things I see with Chat GPT, which is still, I think, an early generation of it, is that you can vary your responses by the prompt that you give it. And in the case of the piano, the first notes that were put into the piano acts like the prompt for the musical AI. So,
right.
so
Yeah.
part of the art in the future will be how to get the most out of your AI system by giving it clever prompts.
Yeah.
You know, I thought 20 years ago that there would be a profession with Google based on how to get good responses from Google by making good queries. You know, because giving Google a query that it gives you 2 million answers isn't very useful sometimes. You know, so I would like to give it a query that I just get 10 answered, but they're all good.
Well, I have one of those things here on my desk, and I would say something like, "Hey Google," I speak in
Right.
throat because if I speak a little harder, the thing automatically turns on. But sometimes it's a woman's voice. It will come back and say, I don't really know what you're saying, basically.
Yeah, anyway,
Can you
those
repeat the
are,
question?
uh-huh. That's one way where that technology is getting into the lives of a lot of people. And certainly I hear for seniors, for example, if in case you know any, they have said that those chat tools are getting more and more useful. And of course, the one part of the usefulness that they're working on is for them to be able to have a conversation with you, because for seniors, one of the problems is we get lonely and we don't have people to talk to. So if you could have a chat bot that would have a good conversation, that would alleviate some of that.
No.
And it would be able to talk about the good old days with real authority because it would have all that.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. And we can use these generative AIs that can write the story where it can swap tails with you.
And you can imagine a future where your self-driving car takes your robot to a drive-in movie theater and a AI generated movie is on the screen and your robot watches it.
That's right. Except I don't think they'll have the AI generated movie on the screen. I think they will somehow project it directly into your nervous system, because screens and visors and stuff like that are still way too crude. Wouldn't you like to get online real time?
That's apparently what
I can ask
Tesla's working on.
That's right.
I can ask Miss Google what she thinks the future of AI is, shall I?
Well, you could ask it, but the problem if you ask Chat GPT, it will only tell you, it will say, I don't know anything after 2021. So
Probably. But you say, "Hey Google, what do you think is the future of AI?"
On the website thedigitalspeaker.com, they say the future of AI in the workplace and our daily lives. A new report by Grandview Research projects that the global artificial intelligence market $9 billion United States dollars by 2025.
okay, that's
A CAGR.
can you tell Google to shut up?
Okay, Google, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Google, stop.
Okay.
Keeps going.
Anyway, I think that was a great example. anyway, so the world is changing, and it's changing around us, and it's going to affect us in ways that we can't even imagine. And some of them I think will be good. Some of them may not be so good. One of the things I wonder about, for example, is I do a lot of writing, and if basic level writing can be done by AI, then how does one become an expert writer if there's not a place to start? Anyway, we will see.
You can ask that question in your writing.
I don't want to. So, okay, the next story is an environmental story, and it really is about Biden's IRA. And across the US, there's a new revolution underway in sectors from solar to nuclear, carbon capture, and green hydrogen. And the goals are to rejuvenate the country's Rust Belt, to decarbonize the world's biggest economy, and to take control of the energy supply chain from China. And so Joe Biden has passed the colossal Inflation Reduction Act, and it's got hundreds of billions of dollars in clean tech subsidies. And it's truly massive. It's an industrial policy. It's strong, direct, and gives a clear signal about the US's priorities. And the tax incentives have made the US irresistible to investors and stealing money, they say, that could have been invested in other countries. They get better return investing in the US now. So the US is now the most opportunity-rich, most aggressive growth, and the most prolific market for renewables investment in the world today. And, one of the questions with all of this is, can the reset of the global energy order create high-paying, clean tech jobs at home and cut emissions and deal with China all at the same time? That's a lot to do. Climate is central to the IRA, but it also is industrial policy on a grand scale, trying to create advanced manufacturing jobs in the Rust Belt. From Ohio to Georgia, investments are pouring in, for example, billions of dollars in terms of plants to produce lithium-ion batteries. And the IRA altogether creates $369 billion in tax credits, grants, loans, and subsidies, many of them guaranteed past 2030. And the Credit Suisse thinks that altogether the public spending enabled by the IRA could reach $800 billion. And if you include private spending generated with it also, $1.7 trillion. And so one aspect is the tax breaks have made marginal products now profitable. And so more investment is coming into them. Investments in things like energy storage, battery systems for utility scale will more than triple by the end of the decade. It's still a pittance, though. And the IRA's biggest impact might be on technologies that have yet to achieve scale, including carbon capture and bioenergy. Take green hydrogen, for example. Subsidies wipe out about half of project costs for these and make the U.S. the most attractive destination for investment in green hydrogen. If you look at the price at which a well-located green hydrogen project, say in Texas, exporting through Corpus Christi, could generate green hydrogen, if they can access enough low-cost renewable power, the cost is pretty untouchable. And claiming a similar advantage over China, though, is going to be a lot harder. About 2/3 of the world's batteries for electric cars and 3/4 of all solar modules are currently produced in China. And at the same time, the U.S. Supply of raw materials, parts, and processing capability is lacking for the U.S. to compete. There's a lot of IRA money going into this, though, and so they're going to build much more capacity in the U.S. But in the short term, for the IRA to succeed, still relies a lot on the Chinese. And there are lots of problems in the way. One of the ways is it's easy to funnel money into projects, but then you have to build the projects and you have to get permits to building. And as Norman will confirm, getting building permits and projects like this in the U.S. are a complicated and time-consuming process. They say under current permitting rules, by the time projects have met all of the conditions demanded of them, most of them will have been delayed by 5 years or more just to deal with the permitting process. So that's going to...
The wind in the North Sea, the typical permitting time is now 10 years.
Okay.
And the North Sea wind promises to change things in Europe dramatically.
Right. So it's not just the U.S. that has permitting problems. I didn't think so. The other issue that they're facing, which sounds funny in some ways, is worker shortages. You know, right now for the projects that are going, the big projects that are going on right now and already permitted, they think the U.S. will need to add 500,000 construction jobs in this year. That's this year when unemployment is already at record lows. And, so it's hard to know what to do. My opinion is this could be another case for enlightened immigration policy if the U.S. Congress with the Republicans in the House could pass such a thing. Wouldn't it be good to give visas for green construction workers? Wouldn't that be something where we all win? So even for supporters, they wonder how an industrial policy that is supposed to, at the same time, rejuvenate America's manufacturing heartland can happen alongside an effort to decarbonize the economy in less than a decade, all while trying to outcompete China in new energy. So it's a big, ambitious plan. The Europeans are now trying to figure out what they can do to beef up their own clean tech investment to compete with America. And so it's causing other people to try to follow along with it. It's a big plan. It may be as big on the scale of what is needed. It's still, even with all that money being thrown at it, it's not a sure deal, though.
It's a challenge.
It's funny, they call it the Inflation Reduction Act because it's probably the most inflationary bit of legislation that's come down the pipe for a long time.
Well, they got to call it something. They were going to call it George, but he was busy. And, to me, one of the things that it seems like, looking at the details, that it seems a lot like the quote Green New Deal that we heard about from the progressives a few years ago. The Green New Deal got such bad press from the media and the energy companies that they stopped using that label anymore. So I think that's how we got to the Inflation Reduction Act. They like the name.
So maybe they hope that with the act that they can control more or less the inflation that is part of what will happen.
Anyway, I'm sure you can make an argument for it. Revitalizing Americans' manufacturing capacity means that costs for the stuff will rise at a slower rate, maybe, and so it reduces inflation. And certainly replacing petrochemicals with renewables reduces the spending in the economy pretty dramatically on energy, and energy is a big component. Anyway, you've got to call it something, and as I say, George was already taken. Now, the next story, I'm afraid, is my material story, and a lot of these material stories stretches our brain. I'm afraid this one has stretched my brain beyond its breaking point. And this is about a development in silicon semiconductors, which we know how to make, and is a technology that we've explored a lot, and where they have found silicon with some special processing can make a novel form of superconductivity. And not only can it make superconductivity, but it can make it in a flavor that looks like it will be particularly important for the emerging quantum technologies. And I'll try to give you a high-level viewpoint of it. I'm still going to have to get into some of the details, though. And superconductivity is a very fancy display of quantum mechanics in action and on a microscopic scale. The heart of superconductivity is with electrons, and electrons somehow overcoming their natural repulsion for each other and forming electron pairs. And there are different kinds of superconductors that are based on different pairing relationships. They call when you pair them, the paired up partners make a new composite particle that they call Cooper pairs, named for the scientists who discovered them. And the conventional way of making superconductors is with what is called S-wave superconductors, like aluminum, tin, or lead. Then there is another way of doing it at higher energy levels, where the electrons form a different pairing that is not quite as close together. These are called D-wave superconductors, and they're made from copper and oxygen, cuprate. And so what is happened here is the Professor Hanno Weitering has replicated cuprate-like physics on semiconductors by growing 1/3 of a layer of tin atoms on a substrate of silicon. And so the repulsion between the tin electrons is so strong that they can't move and won't superconduct. But by implanting a few boron atoms in the silicon layer, then the tin layer becomes a conductor, it becomes metallic, and becomes a superconductor at a critical temperature, which is higher than almost any of the other elemental superconductors. And so a higher temperature means it's easier to achieve. And then, so this is called electron theft superconducting. And while this is interesting, there's something that they discovered that they think is even more intriguing, and that this tin silicon material then hosts chiral semiconductors. A chiral structure is one that rotates either clockwise or counterclockwise. And these are the same and yet different because the mirror images of each other can't be superimposed. They have different properties. And so the experiment has found that they're able to develop these one-dimensional conduction channels on these chiral semiconductors that run like railroad tracks along the surface of the semiconductor. And these channels host exotic particles, besides being the superconductor, including a particle that contains a particle and its antiparticle, and together they become indistinguishable and make a new virtual particle. These are called Majorana particles. And these Majorana particles are topologically protected and impervious to what's going on around them, because they're on these channels on the surface of the superconductor. And that means that they think they can be very good for these computers, the quantum computers, because these Majorana particles makes a structure they think that will be a safeguard against decoherence. the superconductor, the quantum computer, depends on pairs of electrons that have a coherent relationship with each other, and them falling out of that state means they don't work anymore. And so they believe that the Majorana particles can make a structure that protects the particles from disentangling and the computer from failing. And so if this all works, then the possibility is clearly there of integrating these kind of exotic particles into a fairly easy to make silicon-based material that would bring quantum technologies closer to industrial scale production. Now, I'm sure we're going to have some insightful comments from the articles about our Majorana particles on our chiral semiconductors. Okay, and if you see smoke coming up in my screen, it's my brain cooking under all of that. Okay, so now for something that people can at least have some understanding of, asteroid mining has long been in the imagination of space entrepreneurs, and it might move from imagination into something real. A startup has announced plan to launch 2 missions this year designed to validate its space mining technology. And behind this are the estimates of trillions of dollars worth of precious metals that are hard to find and extract on the planet. So the thing that has worked against space asteroid mining is the enormous cost of space missions and the huge technical challenges involved in mining in space. And the industry has already seen one boom and bust cycle after leading players like Deep Space Industry folded after investors lost their nerve. But now California-based Astroforge is taking steps to move forward, and it's going to have 2 missions this year. One designed to test out its space mineral extraction, and another will carry a survey out on a promising asteroid that is close to the Earth. And so the company is planning to target initially asteroids rich in platinum from deep space. And these minerals are in great demand. Their reserves are limited, and mining them can be very environmentally damaging. So it seems like a good target. And they're developing asteroid mineral refining technology that it hopes will allow it to extract the precious metals from these asteroids and return them into space. And a prototype will go up into space in an orbital spacecraft designed by Orb Astro and launched by SpaceX Falcon 9 in April. And it's going to be preloaded with asteroid-like material, which it will then attempt to vaporize and sort into different materials and for bringing back into Earth. Then in October, the company is going to have a bigger mission with a 220-pound spacecraft also designed by Orb Astro that will attempt an 8-month journey to a near-Earth asteroid only about 22 million miles from the Earth, and it will carry a bunch of instruments designed to assess the target asteroid in space. And the Astrophages mining mission, which is expected later this decade, they will target small asteroids less than a mile in diameter and break them apart from a distance, and then use its technology to vaporize, collect and sort stuff from the powdered asteroid. And one problem with this asteroid mining, by the way, is the bulk of the asteroid-rich or mineral-rich asteroids are found in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, which with current technology is a 14-year round trip. I think that might have been one of the kind of things that discouraged investors, because it's hard to have quick ROI where if your technology is successful, it's still going to take you 14 years to see any results from it. So are you guys ready for mining in space?
I had read the Japanese were exploring asteroid mining, but I haven't read anything recently. Andrew, have you?
Well, the Japanese had that thing that landed on an asteroid and actually brought samples of the material back to Earth. And I don't know, the word was they were supposed to share out those samples and let people study them, but there hasn't been anything more. But the funny thing.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, the dry land on the Earth is only 25% of the total, and they say there's all manner of minerals yet to be discovered in the oceans, and you would think it would be easier to send probes into the bottom of the ocean to look for stuff than it would be to go to the asteroid belt if it's a 18-year round trip or whatever it was. So it looks more like a promo than a reality.
With the deep ocean mining has turned out not to be as simple as they thought it would be. One of the impacts is there are environmental impacts, because it turns out the deep ocean is already occupied with living things, and mining operations don't help living things much. So anyway, that has slowed down some of the deep ocean mining. I guess you don't have that kind of problem with the asteroids, or we don't know about it yet. Okay. So now for the cockatoos. Humans use tools every day, but there are not many animals that know how to use tools. And there are even fewer animals that can use a set of tools as well as pick the right one for a job. One of these that can do it is the chimpanzee. Another is the New Caledonian crow. And now scientists have found a third, which are cockatoos. And they did a test. Let me see if I can get this on screen properly. here is the test. So they made this puzzle box for a cockatoo where it has their favorite treat inside, which is a cashew nut, and the birds can only get to the cashew nut with a series of tools. The way this is usually set up is first they need to have a stick that pierces an element. I guess you can see it there, that in the puzzle, and then a more flexible tool that gets the cashew out. And each tool is need to be used in a particular order and a certain way for the cockatoo to succeed. And the cockatoos learned to take both tools with them because they didn't know which would be needed. And this preparing by taking multiple tools has only been seen before in our closest relative, the cockatoos. And the researchers changed the layout of the puzzle box and removed, for example, the element that needed to be pierced to see if the cockatoo was really solving the puzzle each time or was just doing steps that it remembered. The cockatoos would solve the puzzle the next time in the new configuration. And some cockatoos, like the one shown in the picture here, were able to do it the first time it tried it and fairly quickly in about 30 seconds. Others needed more attempts and took longer. This fits with a lot of other research that we've heard where, some of us and some of the animals are just quicker at figuring these things out than others. And, most tool using animals only use tools for one specific job, like these monkeys using these sticks to collect ants. But termites, you're right. But the cockatoos were anticipating needing more than one tool for the task and being prepared with multiple tools. Now, one of the things that was interesting to me is if you look at these tool using capabilities, we know humans can use tools. Our brains are about 1,300 cc's in size. And the oldest pre-humans that were making tools had a brain of about 500 cc's. The chimps who can use primitive tools like we saw in the picture there have a brain of about 400 grams. But these cockatoos have a brain a little over 8 grams as opposed to the humans 1,300 grams. So it's you developing these capabilities with a lot smaller brain size. The cockatoo brain density in the frontal lobes, though, is much denser than humans, and in a smaller frontal lobe area, it has about the same number of brain cells as humans. So maybe that is why it has the brain horsepower to be able to solve the problem. But certainly being able to do the same kind of thing with an 8-gram brain as opposed to a human 1,300-gram brain is no small feat for a bird brain.
So what are they going to do with this information?
Anyway, it's interesting, and one of the things that scientists are learning through this is they are still very busy learning how the brain can do what it can do, and having this kind of equivalent task between a cockatoo and a human makes them really think about how we can think.
Well, and they say that for the animal to do this, it has to have some ability to construct a picture of the future and understand how the tool will influence that future. And they
Right.
say that's an indication of consciousness, this
Right,
idea of having an image of what might be.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, now another story, human story that I think is interesting is among the many distinctive traits of humans is our ability to communicate with each other. A lot of that is spoken, but much of it still involves body communication and facial expression. And humans have faces that are different from our primate cousins. Of the thousands of species of mammals on Earth, the human species owns the most expressive face. It has 44 muscles, 22 on each side, about twice as many as chimpanzees. And these muscles are what give us the ability to have all these expressions. One common misconception in American culture is that it takes twice as many facial muscles to frown as it does to smile. In fact, frowning uses 11 muscles, while smiling uses 12. So it's harder to smile than to frown. Babies fresh from the womb prefer a face or even a general pattern of a face. So we're wired from faces from the time we're born. And there are regions of the brain that are devoted solely to recognizing faces. Facial expressions are important parts of teaching language to infants. And Charles Darwin, a couple of hundred years ago, linked facial expressions to different emotions and said that the expressions appear to be common to all people. Since then, psychologists have studied it and have identified 6 primary emotions where facial expressions seem to be common among all people of the earth. And these are happiness, sadness, fear, anger, disgust, and surprise. And so these are the same for an Eskimo or a Chinese person as they are in America and Canada. And humans have an innate ability to read facial expressions and then to mirror the expressions they see. So if you see a smiling face, you're more likely to smile. And our face clearly identifies us. And within the human brain, the fusiform gyrus is the part of the brain that is involved in facial recognition. And facial recognition was built into our brains by evolution because of the importance of the face in establishing and maintaining relationships, reading emotions, and determining trust in social interactions. There's some people who lack this facial recognition skill. Now, one of the hypotheses regarding the evolutionary language of or the evolution origin of language is called theory of mind. and theory of mind refers to the ability to infer the thoughts, emotions, and intentions of others. And the ability to read the emotions from facial expressions allows social relationships to run more smoothly. And there are people who are unable to read or interpret these facial expressions. One of the most well-known are the autistics. We're not born with the ability to read faces. It normally develops in early childhood between 4 and 4.5 years. Autism appears to involve impairment of the proper functioning of theory of mind. And it's increasingly associated with deficits of theories of mind and the faulty appraisal of social interactions. MRI scans of normal people show activity in the fusiform gyrus that I talked about before, but in the brain of a person with autism, looking at a face generates no activity in this brain region. And so autism looks like it is some kind of defect in learning to use this part of the brain in infancy. And the evolution of the human face seems closely associated with the evolution of theory of mind and language and communication and our ability to cooperate with each other.
I wonder what if someone gets a facelift, if that would affect the ability or the communication.
Well, I don't know, unless they make it so tight they can't smile, then
We're expecting a lady to come from California, of course, in a couple of weeks, and who is coming here because in IAHIC apparently you can get a facelift, which is a lot cheaper than elsewhere.
well,
So
how about you, Norman? Have you experienced a reduction in your ability to communicate?
I don't think so, Richard. My facelift, of course, I wanted to be small, just take off a decade or two.
Okay.
well, maybe that's what I should do.
Well, Phyllis Diller said that if she had one more facelift, she'd have to start shaving.
Yeah, well, I've seen people with a navel on their forehead.
Okay. Going from the face to the brain, now a study finds mushrooms that can magnify memory. Edible mushrooms that boost nerve growth and enhances memory. And they found active compounds from the mushroom commonly called lion's mane mushroom. And these have been used in traditional medicine in Asia. And they wanted to scientifically determine if they actually do any good for the brain. And this is still early tests. Its preclinical testing found that lion's mane mushroom have a significant impact of the growth of brain cells and improving memories. From the writer, quote, we found that the active compounds promote neuron projections, extending and connecting to other neurons. That's how the neurons connect and make memories and do their job. And so these are lion's mane mushrooms. They are available from Amazon, And when I read these, I started adding them to my diet. I'm happy for my brain to continue to be able to connect and learn stuff. And every Tuesday, I use that. So I hope this will help me next week. Anyway, comments from you guys. Have you heard of these lion mane mushrooms?
Hey,
I haven't heard of them, but I just finished an interesting book by a guy named Nick Lane called Life Ascending, and it's about evolution. And Richard, you might be interested in it because he goes through the steps of evolution from, the subsea thermal vents all the way up through bacteria and so on. But near the end of it, he's talking about death as being a necessary step in evolution because it makes room for the replacements. But the interesting thing was there is this compound called rapamycin.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if you've heard of rapamycin.
Yes, I have. They
It-
found it from a fungus on Easter Island.
That's right. And apparently, when this stuff is fed to mice, it increases their lifespan by a factor of 3. And they also looked into birds, and typical birds live 10 times as long as they should live. Like a pigeon can live to be 35 years old, and it weighs the same as a rat, and a rat only lives to be 3.5 years old.
Mhm.
And they looked into this, and the difference was in the mitochondria of birds compared to the mitochondria of mammals. And the mitochondria are the little hijacked bacteria inside our own cells that create the energy that the cell uses.
Mhm.
And these mitochondria leak what are called free radicals.
Right.
And the bird mitochondria has only about 1/10 the leakage of free radicals that the mammal mitochondria does. And they think this rapamycin has something to do with that. So anybody who's interested in living longer should Google rapamycin. And
the recommendation with rapamycin is if you're interested in doing it, doing it where you have a doctor's supervision actually matters, because in about 5% of the people, rapamycin is damaging, but
Yeah,
for
it's-
95% of the people, it's okay. That's why when you get started, you want to start with a doctor who knows about it and knows what he's doing.
yeah, it sounds like you read the same article.
It wasn't the same article, but I've been
Oh.
reading about rapamycin for 2 years. And when I took that to my doctor, he was not interested in hearing it, so I didn't think that he was going to give me a support. It looks like the cost of the rapamycin that you would need is about $60 a month. So on one hand, it's a little expensive. On another hand, it's not that expensive.
No, it's an immunosuppressant, and
Right.
they use it in organ transplant to
Right.
people to reduce the rejection of new organs.
And
But
that's why it's already available, because it has been approved for another use.
by the FDA.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. You wonder if guys like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger are loading up on it, because they're in their 90s and still going strong. So
Well, certainly I figure out if I can know about this stuff from my office in Chapala, that it might be that those other guys do too. And
Very
you've heard of anyway.
I'd never heard of it, so that's
Okay.
why I brought it up. It was news to
Okay,
me.
I appreciate your bringing it up. It is one of the drugs that is actually under study in the U.S. for life extension. The studies are not very advanced yet, though. Okay. Well, thank you guys for joining me today. It was another good session. I still really enjoy doing these, and these are an important part of my life. And I feel like they're one of the things that keeps my brain growing. And one of the things that helps are these articles like the chiral semiconductors that break any brain muscles that I had already built, trying to understand them.
Well, we'll look forward to this lion's mane stuff doing something for you. So
Well, as I say, it's available. It's available with quick delivery from Amazon. It's 500 pesos for 180 tablets.
And how many do you take? One a day?
I don't know. That's what I'm taking. I haven't read any. I haven't paid enough attention to actually where I don't know what I should be taking.
You sure you're not supposed to smoke them?
No, I don't think I'm supposed to smoke them, but I'd be ready if I had to.
whatever
Anyway,
whatever it takes.
That's right.
yeah, whatever it
Anyway,
takes.
adios, friends, and we'll see
Okay,
you
we'll
next
see
week.
you. Bye-bye.